Hello everyone, welcome to English for medical students. This is the writing section. The focus is the graph or chart description. This lesson is about line graph. The lesson is prepared and presented by me, Hoàng Thị Hằng. Welcome. This is what we are going to learn today. We are finding out the characteristics of a line graph, and then I'm reminding you about the tense use, vocabulary used, and time expressions in the line graph description. And after that, we do some practice to master this graph. Before we discover something about a line graph, let's complete this exercise by filling in the gaps with suitable words. We have 6 statements with 7 gaps. Now please pause the recording for 5 minutes before you check the answer. Now I'm showing you the answer. Number 1, much more slowly. 2, much farther. Much here is used to emphasize the big gap between something. 3, 2 gaps for number 3. For climate, we have colder, right? More successful in the Winter Olympics. Number 4. Yeah. He ran well. Better. Compare this year and last year. And the last one, number 6. Now let's move to our lesson today. This is an illustration of a line graph. Of course, we have a title or the question and a line graph over some years with some categories to compare to each other, right? And well, please write the introduction and the overview of this kind of graph. As I have told you in the previous lesson, for every kind of graph, the introduction and the overview don't have any changes. For the introduction, we just need to paraphrase the question, and the overview, identify the key features. Please spend 5 minutes to complete the introduction and the overview. Now, I'm showing you my answer. Line graph, the given line graph. In the question or the title, they use the verb show, and I use compares, right? Men and women. Now I start the overview with overall. Number of smoking decreased dramatically over the survey time. There was an upward trend. Remember, for the trends we just have upward and downwards. We don't have increased trend or decreased trend. Right. Now, by looking at this line graph, can you think of the characteristic of a line graph? The key term is trend, that's it. A line graph always shows the trend of something over some time. For example, in this line graph, we compare only 2 categories between male and female over 40 years time, right? Now, when you describe a line graph, I want you to pay attention to the 10 use. Whether you are given the time in the past or time in the past and the present and the future. Now, using the verb to grow and adverb rapidly, complete the sentences to describe information in the graphs. Focus on the correct verb tense in each case, bearing in mind the time phrases you are given in dates in the graph. Number 1, here. Up to today, from the past up to today, we use present perfect with the verb grow and adverb rapidly. Now for 2, 3, 4, and 5, please spend 5 minutes to complete the statements here. Well, I'm showing you the answer. Number 2, between, grew rapidly, time in the past. 2020, 2030, time in the future, right? To be predicted or to be expected. Or you can use will for a prediction. By, with the phrase by the year, what tense should we use? Perfect tense, right? Until. And number 5, will have grown by the end of, because this refers to the future time. Now, that's in the first note for line graph description, the tense used. Let's move to the vocabulary review. To express a trend, you need to use both nouns and verbs. And the words related to trend, make a good use of adjectives and adverbs in your description to make sure that you describe it in detail. Right? Now, noun and verb to express the upward trend. We've got upward trends, we also got downward trend. Fluctuation, peak, and approximately, just above, just below, or almost, approximate words. Now let's move to the practice. Please fill in the gaps with the correct vocabulary. Should use no more than 2 words for each gap. This is one of the simplest line graph. Now please pause the recording for 5 minutes to complete this exercise. Well, I'm showing you the answer. You can use rose or increased or climb or grew and went up. All these verbs are used to express an upward trend or an increase in something. Number 2, a fall or decline, a drop, to express a downward trend. Next, after a preposition before, we use a gerund. Number 4, reach a peak. Preposition of, right? A peak of what? Well, we have just done with the verb tense and the vocabulary. Let's move to adjectives and adverbs. Continue with the vocabulary, but no more verb and noun. This is adjectives and adverbs. The adjective and adverb are used to make your description clear and specific. Some examples are given to you to make the note here clear. Increase steadily. You can express increased from 40 to 55, but if you use an adverb here, your description is much clearer. A rise and a steady rise. Because a line graph always expresses a trend or some trends, so we need to pay attention to the time expression. We can split the lines here into some phases. Some phases with the upward trend, some phases with fluctuation, for example, or the downward trend. You can use over the next 3 days or 3 days later, and the last year, the final year at the beginning of the period here. 1960 is at the beginning of the period. Something happens. For example, in the first 15 years of the survey from 1960 to 1975, there was a dramatic increase in the number of women smoking here. This phase, use it. There was an increase, but I used dramatic increase. Much clearer, right? Now, please complete this exercise within 7 minutes. Describe changes with adjectives and adverbs. A line graph here with 3 categories: rising cost of living, the traffic, and lifestyle. We got here. Now please pause the recording for 7 minutes. Well, I'm showing you the answer now. The highest point. We just have the highest and lowest point. We don't have the biggest and smallest point. The biggest number, the smallest number. The only one to decrease to 80,000. Traffic, greatest overall rise. And number 3, notable rise. Note, you know, notable, notice. You can identify, you can see it. Lifestyle, the most consistent, synonym with consistent, stable, right? Remain there. Which one? Lowest of the 3 reasons. The last 7, John's lowest. Alright, now I'm showing you some notes when you describe not just the line graph, but any kind of graph or chart. You need to identify the common trends in the graphical information. And does any of the information differ from the rest in obvious and significant way? For example, something increased the most or something decreased the most. I mean that you need to identify the different information to group information. We call it grouping information. And then, is there anything that 2 or more categories have in common? You group the common types, the common categories together to some phases during the whole period. And is there anything that only happens once? Or, for example, category 1 increased only for the first 10 years and later that it decreased. Got it? Well, I have shown you the characteristics of a line graph and then the 10 use, vocabulary use, both verb noun and adjective adverb, and the time expressions. Now let's move to the practice part. For the introduction, you need to use the paraphrasing skills. Mind that there are 3 ways to paraphrase something, right? Then you need to identify the key terms for the overview part, and please start the overview with the words overall, or is it clear that, or some phrases with the synonym, right? And then don't forget to group information using comparative and superlative. You can split time phases to express suitable trend to compare in the detailed description. For the detailed description, you can use 2 or 3 paragraphs. It's up to your choice. Now, a line graph is given to you. Use the information and language from the lesson to answer writing task 1. That's it for IELTS writing task 1. Spend about 20 minutes on this task. Remember that I always remind you to write the outline before you do any writing. You are given 20 minutes on this task, so please spend around 10 minutes to make out the key terms, to remind yourself of the vocabulary used, the 10 used, time expressions, something like that, or paraphrasing. Now you have 4 categories and over 15 years. Please give yourself 10 minutes to identify which information you will include in your description and another 10 minutes to write. Ready? Please pause the recording. Well, I'm showing you some keynotes from the graph. Overall trend is upward. The employment and study just below 90,000 in 2015, and family, friends and adventure, the same starting number. Are your notes the same or different from mine? Yeah, notes can be different. It's based on the way you look at the graph, right? Don't worry if your notes are different from mine. Well, another exercise practice for you to complete. In this exercise, you are given both the bar charts and the line graph within one introduction and one question. Your job is to describe both of them in one task, right? Give yourself some time to get used to something. Don't run, don't worry too much, okay? Now for this kind of graph, you can give you up to 25 minutes instead of 20. To give you, in order to have more time to identify some comparison, some trends, something like that. Okay. As I always remind you in my lesson, make a good use of adjectives and adverbs in your description and in your writing to make it beautiful. And try to avoid repetition, both structures, means grammar, and vocabulary. Alright, please pause the recording for 25 minutes. Planning and writing. If you still have some questions to ask me, feel free to contact me. I'm available to help you. I hope that my lesson is useful to you. And this is my reference. My name is Hoàng Thị Hằng. Goodbye everyone.